we will discuss today the most important and accepted theory called as potassium pump theory, or it is called as proton concept theory. And theory proposed by Leavitt in 1974. Later, number of scientists elaborated this theory, that is as Raschke in 1975 and Bowring in 1976, and thereby they could able to conclude that potassium can pump into the guard cells, and which results in the increase in the osmotic potential value. Thereby, osmotic pressure increases and ultimately the stomata opens. But during the night or in the absence of light, potassium is pumped out of the cell, out of the guard cells. So thereby, potassium ions are pumped into the guard cell or out of the guard cells, which helps in maintaining turgidity and flaccidity of the guard cells. That's why it's called as potassium pump theory. It is also called as a proton concept theory. So here the potassium is pumped into the guard cell or moved out of the guard cells by the exchange of protons. By the exchange of protons. When the guard cells has to gain the protons, so gain the potassium ions, it has to make an exchange with the hydrogen ions. So that's why hydrogen ions will move out of the guard cell and protons will be coming into the guard cell. Vice versa in the absence of light. That's why it is called as proton concept theory. Now let us discuss what is happening here. So during the daytime, actually, in the presence of sunlight, starch content of the guard cells are converted into malic acid. So compared to starch sugar hypothesis, they revealed that starch is converted into glucose. But here the theory has been explaining that the starch content which was there in the guard cells will be converted into malic acid in the presence of a sunlight. And this conversion of starch into malic acid is controlled by the enzyme called as phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase. Phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase, which is abbreviated as PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase. This is the enzyme responsible for converting the starch into malic acid. But this malic acid soon dissociates, breaks up into malate ions and hydrogen ions or protons. Malic acid dissociates into malate and protons. Now what happens? The cytokinin enzyme, or cytokinin hormone activates the plasma membrane, means plasma membrane pore size is increased. Porosity of the plasma membrane is increased by the hormone called as cytokinin, which results in the influx of potassium ions into the guard cells from the surrounding subsidiary cells or accessory cells, and hydrogen ions are pumped out of the guard cells. So this exchange of ions are possible with the expenditure of energy in the form of ATP. So during this exchange of potassium ions and hydrogen ions, permeability of the membrane is increased by the hormone called as cytokinin, and also it is helped by supplying the energy in the form of ATP. So now what happens? Potassium ions are pumped into the guard cells, but because of that, what happens? There will be an imbalance within the guard cells because the positively charged potassium ions are added onto the guard cells. There is a ionic imbalance which occurs. To bring up this imbalance, Chloride ions are absorbed by the guard cells. Okay, chloride ions are absorbed. Negatively charged chloride ions are absorbed and positively charged potassium ions are present. Thereby, ionic balance is maintained. So, thereby, now the guard cells are rich in potassium ions as well as the malate ions, which are already there. Because protons are moved out, potassium ions are retained. And this presence of potassium ions and the malate increases the osmotic potential value of the guard cells because it increases the concentration. Osmotic pressure value increases, potential value increases, water potential value of the guard cell decreases. Water potential value decreases, osmotic potential value increases. So thereby, we can able to observe there is a endosmosis. And endosmosis results in turgidity of the guard cells. The turgid guard cells results in the opening of stomata. This is what happening during the daytime. But during night, again it is reverse. During night, we could able to observe that photosynthesis stops during the night because of the absence of light. Carbon dioxide accumulates in the guard cells. But during daytime, what happened? That carbon dioxide was able to be absorbed. But because of the accumulation of carbon dioxide, that carbon dioxide dissolves in water, forms a carbonic acid. pH value decreases. So thus, now what happens? Inhibitor hormone abscisic acid changes the permeability of the guard cells. And that potassium malate dissociates into potassium and malate ions. And this results in influx of hydrogen ions into the cell and efflux of potassium ions out of the guard cells. So reversal occurs. Potassium ions are moving out of the guard cells and hydrogen ions are taken in. Now, malate ions present in the guard cells, they combine with water, again forms the malic acid, which is converted back into starch. Okay. So, as we have already knowing that starch is insoluble, and thereby osmotic potential value of the guard cell decreases. Then, naturally, exosmosis occurs. Water moves out of the guard cells. Guard cells becomes flaccid, resulting in the closure of stomata. So this is what happening during the night period. And later, this theory is considered as the most accepted theory for the explanation of mechanism behind the opening and closing of stomata. So this has been supported by all later scientists. And that's why we can say this is as most accepted theory. So here you can see the same diagrammatically they have explained that protons are pumped out. Okay, potassium ions are pumped in. Okay, that is the ion exchange which takes place. So this is helped by ATP. So hydrogen ions are pumped out of the guard cells and proton ions are pumped into the guard cells during the daytime. So that is the diagram. The same it is explained again. Now coming to significance of transpiration. In what way the transpiration is so important to the plant, even though it is a net loss process. Because when there is a continuous transpiration, there should be a continuous absorption of water. Thereby, plants when absorb the water and translocate the water to such a great height against the gravitational force, they have to spend huge amount of energy. Then the question arises, why should the plants lose such a huge amount of energy for a transpiration, which is a continuously a loss? So why not the plants will control the process of transpiration? But it is very difficult for the plants to control the transpiration because transpiration has more controlled phenomenon over the other physiological functions which occurs. That's why Curtis described this as unnecessary evil. Because of the net loss, transpiration cannot be avoided by the plant. That's why it's called as unnecessary evil. And Stewart called it as an unavoidable evil. So now let us discuss what are the advantages of transpiration and why we can say that it is necessary evil. The first and the foremost, we have seen that transpiration responsible for the development of a transpiration pool. And the transpiration pool develops in the mesophyll tissue, and the transpiration pool passes on to the xylem in the leaf, then passes onto the stem, and ultimately comes to the root and passes on to the soil water. So that transpiration pool is created because of transpiration, which helps in both ascent of sap and the passive absorption of water. So that's why ascent of sap and passive absorption of water is depending on transpiration. And then we can say the important physiological functions like photosynthesis and respiration, and which is based on the gaseous exchange. For photosynthesis, carbon dioxide to be taken in by the plant and oxygen is to be released to the atmosphere. But during respiration, it is reverse. Oxygen is to be taken in, carbon dioxide is to be released. Means there is a continuous exchange of gases. And how this gaseous exchange is possible? When the stomata is open. When the stomata opens during the daytime and when there is a transpiration. So transpiration indirectly controls the process of photosynthesis and respiration by gaseous exchange. Then next important use is it is responsible for maintaining the turgidity of the cells, because when the water is moving from root to the leaf, water is distributed to the each and every cells of the plant body, and when the sufficient amount of water is gained by the cells enters into turgidity, and this turgidity is required for the normal growth because the cell is retained in a stretched condition. There is a where there is an operation of turgor pressure, and that's why the cells are placed in a turgidity, and which helps in the normal growth. Then if there is a continuous transpiration, the plant if growing in a waterlogged condition, waterlogged condition is adverse for the plants, we have seen, because if soil is waterlogged, there is no chance for aeration. Roots can't get sufficient air to respire, and the plant cannot grow normally. So in that case, if there is a continuous transpiration, the waterlogged condition can be overcome. More and more water is lost to the environment by transpiration, and thereby the soil water condition may be normal. And another most advantage is, you know that any from any surface, if the water evaporates, that surface gets cooled. So the same phenomenon operates on the leaf surface, because by transpiration, from the leaf surface, water is evaporated, and thereby leaf surface is getting the cooling effect. So thereby plants or the leaves are not allowed to overheat during the higher light intensity. So that is what the advantage. But similarly, we can able to observe there are certain disadvantages. So what is the disadvantage? So if transpiration continues during the hot dry periods, then sufficient amount of water may not be available in the soil for the plants to absorb. And if the continuous transpiration occurs in a dry period, plants may lead into wilting, and ultimately if the wilting is permanent, then the plant will die. So that is disadvantage. Next is, as we have already discussed, transpiration requires huge amount of energy. It consumes energy. Then another disadvantage, you have seen the xerophytic plants. The plants themselves adapted to grow in a xeric condition or dry and land where there is a scarcity of water. To grow in this xeric condition, the plants has to show certain modifications to reduce the transpiration. Otherwise, very difficult to survive there. And to reduce the trans- transpiration, then they have to be affected by the other functions like photosynthesis and all. Because xerophytes, you know that they reduce their leaves, or leaves are modified into spines, and in those cases the stem is undergoing the photosynthesis, not the normal leaf. Or the plant surface has to develop with a cuticle, more thicker cuticle, or they have to secrete certain mucilaginous substances to hold the water within the plant organs. So these are all certain modifications that we can able to observe, and all these modifications has to be developed in the plant to control the transpiration. And you know the deciduous plants. What is the deciduous plants? Which are shedding their leaves during the winter season, during summer, where there is a dry period. Why do they shed the leaves? To reduce the rate of transpiration at the cost of rate of photosynthesis. If the leaves are shed, photosynthesis is not possible by those plants at that period. So even though at the loss of photosynthesis, they are shedding their leaves. So that is what the disadvantage the plants faces by the transpiration. Okay. Now let us consider the factors affecting the transpiration. What are the different factors that affect the transpiration? The factors that affect the transpiration we can classify into external factors or environmental factors. The environmental conditions, the surroundings of the plant has a direct or indirect role to control the rate of transpiration. Or sometimes we could able to observe the internal structure of the plant body. They themselves are also responsible for controlling the process of transpiration. So thus, whenever we talk about the factors that affecting the transpiration, we have to group those factors as environmental factors and internal factors. First, let us discuss about the light as a factor. So in the graph, we can able to observe that this is a vertical axis showing the rate of transpiration, and the horizontal axis that is showing the light intensity. How the light intensity goes on increasing, with that we can able to observe rate of transpiration also gradually increases to a certain limit. So intensity of light increases the rate of evaporation of water from the leaf surface, and it also causes the guard cells to open the stomata, and thereby we can say increase in light intensity increases the rate of transpiration. And this light intensity, naturally we know that it warms the leaf surface and leads to open the stomata, and thereby we can say a sunny day will show the maximum rate of transpiration. So that is what the light intensity has. Then we can able to observe the humidity, and also humidity is also having its own effect. Okay, so at a low humidity there is a lower concentration of water molecules in the air. In the lower humidity there is a lower concentration of water molecules in the vicinity of the leaves. And this will help in transport of more water molecules from the leaves by diffusion. And what actually transpiration, how the transpiration occurs, you know that transpiration occurs by two steps. First is evaporation of water from the mesophyll tissue into the intercellular spaces. Recall the structure of a leaf. Mesophyll tissues having numerous intercellular spaces. Leaf is a wet surface. Sorry, mesophyll tissue is a wet surface. And from this, there is a continuous evaporation and water vapors are accumulated in the intercellular spaces and the substomatal cavity. And when the stomata or the guard cells opens, these water vapors accumulated in the intercellular spaces will diffuse out along the concentration gradient. And that ends with a transpiration. And you know that diffusion rate is depending on difference in the concentration between the two regions, that is intercellular space and the outer atmosphere. If the humidity is lesser in the outer atmosphere, more and more water can diffuse out. But the humidity is high in the outer side or in the outer atmosphere, means there is a already air surrounding the leaf is saturated with water vapors. Then more and more water molecules cannot diffuse out. Rate of the diffusion, transpiration reduces. So lower the humidity, higher the rate of transpiration, and higher the humidity, lower the rate of transpiration. Okay, so that is how humidity is responsible. Then temperature. So increase in temperature not only warms the water body, warms the leaf surface, but also we can able to observe the air temperature increases. Okay, so thereby what happens? Rise in temperature increases the water evaporation. Further rise in the atmospheric temperature reduces the relative humidity of the atmosphere also. You have to see. That means water holding capacity of the air increases with the increased temperature. Water holding capacity of the atmosphere increases or the air increases means more and more water can move out of the intercellular spaces or increase the rate of transpiration. So thus, rising temperature reduces the relative humidity and which increases the rate of transpiration. And it has been observed that even at 35 degrees centigrade, stomata can open even in darkness. And on the other hand, stomata do not open in daytime when the temperature is less than 8 degrees Celsius. So that is how temperature controls the rate of transpiration. Then wind. So transpiration depends on the diffusion, we have seen already. Imagine the leaf surface. Imagine the leaf surface. There is a transpiration. And with the transpiration, what happens? Air surrounding the stomata gets saturated with the water vapor. Okay. Thereby, if saturated water vapors, they are near the vicinity of a stomata, further transpiration is not possible. That's why if the wind is blowing normally, this saturated air can be removed and dry air is brought nearer to the stomata, brought nearer to the leaf surface by the wind. And thereby what happens? Transpiration can continue. So moving wind removes the water vapor near the leaf surface, which causes the lowering of a relative humidity. And when the relative humidity is decreased, there is an increased transpiration. So that's why transpiration as depends on diffusion. Windy conditions cause the air molecules to be blown away from the leaves, preventing the air around the leaves becoming saturated, and thereby we can observe that they are responsible for controlling the rate of transpiration. Then the soil moisture availability, that is also one of the important feature. If sufficient moisture is available in the soil, then only the plants can absorb the sufficient amount of water, and thereby they can continue with the transpiration. Otherwise it is very difficult for them. So then naturally transpiration rate reduces. Then type of the plant. Plants transpire the water at different rates. Some plants growing in a dry land, arid regions, like as cactus, like succulents, xerophytes, they conserve the energy. Means they reduce the rate of transpiration. So that is how we can able to observe there is a phenomenon. Then internal factors that affecting the transpiration. How internal structure? Cuticle. You know that there is a thick cuticle over the leaf surface. Why the cuticle? It is to lower the rate of transpiration. So that's why xerophytic plants will have maximum thickness of the cuticle to reduce the evaporation of water. Then leaf area means transpiring area. Plant with a larger surface area with more number of stomata distributed will show the more higher rate of transpiration compared to the leaf with a lesser surface area and the lesser number of stomata. That is transpiring area. Then the root shoot ratio. This is most important. So surface area ratio of root and shoot, they must be in a equal proportion. They must be in a equal ratio. Because any amount of water transpired has to be absorbed from soil. Therefore, surface area of the leaf and the surface area of the root should coordinate. Ratio should be high. Then only the transpiration can continue. Then the structure of a mesophyll tissue. If the mesophyll tissues are more compactly arranged with a lesser intercellular spaces, rate of transpiration reduces. Because I already told you, the first step of transpiration is evaporation of water from the mesophyll tissue into intercellular spaces. If the large intercellular spaces are there, if accumulated with the water molecules, water vapors, then there will be a chance of more and more water to diffuse out of the leaf. So that's why more the compact mesophyll tissues reduces the rate of transpiration. Then leaf modifications. Already I told you, xerophytic plants are either having a cuticle, or leaf is modified into spines or prickles, or leaves are modified into scaly leaves, that is the leaves which are highly reduced, or leaves are modified into phyllodes like acacia, you know that. Stem is modified into phylloclade like cactus, and all these modifications are found in xerophytes, which also reduces the rate of transpiration. So this is what the different factors. Now let us come to another term, that is anti-transpirant. What is that anti-transpirant? So you know that agriculture depends on irrigation. With the more availability of water, with the more facility of irrigation, the farmer will get benefit, and farmer will have a greater productivity in their farm. And any country is usually facing the problem of this irrigation. If the crop plants are continuously undergoing the transpiration, the same amount of water is to be irrigated, or the same amount of water should be available for the plants. So that's why scientists are thinking of to increase the productivity of agriculture by the supply of limited amount of water. So that is the thinking of the scientists. How can reduce the consumption of water by the crop plants without affecting its productivity? So that's why scientists were able to find out certain substances which can reduce the rate of transpiration, but it should not affect the rate of photosynthesis. Means it should not affect the productivity. And that's why such substances are called as anti-transpirants, the substance which reduces the rate of transpiration. So substance which applied to the plants reduce the rate of transpiration without affecting the rate of photosynthesis or growth or any of the life processes in the plant. They are called as anti-transpirants. So these are the compounds applied to the leaves of the plants to reduce the rate of transpiration. Okay, and these anti-transpirants used are grouped into four types. One is stomatal closing types. So we know that most of the transpiration occurs through the stomata. And some fungicides like phenyl mercuric acetate and some herbicides like atrazine, if they are used in a lower concentration, they act as anti-transpirants because they induce the closure of stomata. And no doubt this is reducing the rate of photosynthesis because it reduces the gaseous section. But still, the partial closure of stomata can control the loss of water by transpiration. There is stomatal closing type. Then the second is film forming type. You know that the plastic material or a waxy materials which can form a thin film. So when they are sprayed on the leaf surface. So these plastic substance or a waxy materials can be sprayed over the leaf surface, which makes a thin coating, thin film, and which can reduce the rate of transpiration, but it cannot reduce the rate of photosynthesis to a certain extent. To a certain extent, because when you are spraying, it can close the stomata also. So that's why we can say that is called as a film forming the types. It is like a colorless plastids, silicone oil, wax, like that. They have been used. Then third type is reflectance type. Reflectance type means they are white materials which helps in reflecting. And these white materials will make the coat over the leaf and thereby increases the reflectance of the leaf. And they are generally diatomaceous earth product, hydrated lime, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, all these can be used as a reflectants. Then growth retardants. These chemicals reduce the shoot growth, but they can increase the root growth. And thereby plants can resist the drought. If the shoot surface is more, then the more transpiration. But here the shoot surface is reduced, growth is reduced, but increases the root growth. And that also controls the rate of transpiration. And such substances, example, the psychocell, one of the useful chemical for improving water status of the plant. So that is what the anti-transpirants. Then coming to guttation. What is guttation? It is also a type of loss of water from the leaf surface, but water is lost in the form of a liquid state. And particularly when the atmospheric condition is moist and soil is warm and the conditions are if humid, then we can able to observe this water has been lost in the form of a liquid state. And loss of water in a liquid state through the vein endings along the margin of leaves is called as guttation. Loss of water in the form of a liquid state through the vein endings along the margin of a leaf is called as a guttation. A term guttation was coined by Burgerstein, and this has been observed in plants that growing in a, as I told you, warm soil or under humid conditions, particularly in many grasses, tomato, potato, cabbage, we can see that. And what structurally they are having for guttation? For guttation, they have a structure called as hydatodes, or guttation occurs through hydatodes or water stomata. And this is the section, vertical section of a leaf. And you can see this is the epidermal layer. And this is the xylem vessels. You can see these are the xylem vessels. And these are the mesophyll tissues, normal mesophyll tissue. And this is the endings of veins, veins and veinlets, you know that. And veins and veinlets are ending with the xylem vessels. And water is coming up in this direction and comes to the end. And through this, water is released into this loosely arranged parenchyma cells that is called as epithem. Loosely arranged parenchyma cells called as a epithem. And then this epithem on their epidermis ends in a small pore, which is called as a hydathode pore. Hydathode pore. And through this, water is moving out in the form of a liquid. And in the early morning, don't confuse with the dew, in the early morning, in the winter season, you might have been observed sometimes the leaf in the edges where there is a vein ending and the leaf tip, water drops accumulates. And that is because of this guttation. And significance of the guttation. So it is of lesser importance as compared to the transpiration, but we can able to observe it may cause the injury to the leaf margin because of salt accumulation. Because during the guttation, what happens? Water comes out through the xylem vessels, and that it is the water not a pure form. It is dissolved with all these minerals. They are dissolved with salt. That's why water, along with the guttation, comes with salt. And as temperature increases, then that water drops accumulated on the leaf margin evaporates, but leaves the salt there itself, and that salt can injure the leaf margins. Okay, so that is one. But in the other way, hydathode has a pore opening through which microbes can enter, pathogens can enter, but that is pore is bordered by the salt, and those salt helping in protecting the invading pathogens. They kill the invading pathogens, entering pathogens, by plasmolizing those pathogens because of salt. So that is the significance. Now let us just have a difference between transpiration and guttation. So what are the differences between transpiration and guttation? Transpiration can occur through stomata, cuticle, and lenticel. We have seen already when we talk about transpiration, transpiration can occur through these three structures, and basically they are classified as stomatal, cuticle, and lenticel. But guttation occurs through only hydatodes. And then transpiration occurs during the daytime, but guttation occurs during the night because the condition must be humid. Okay, night time only it can occur. Water lost in the form of a vapor during transpiration. Water is always lost in the form of a vapor, but during guttation it is in the form of a water drops, liquid drops. Transpired water is pure because it is evaporated water, but gutted water contains dissolved substances. Already, as I told you, water comes out through the xylem in a liquid drops, which is dissolved with all these minerals. And that's why gutted water is not pure as the water coming from the transpiration. It is dissolved with the dissolved substances. Then transpiration is a controlled mechanism because stomatal movement is controlled. Transpiration is also controlled. But hydrothode, they are not having a mechanism of opening and closing of nature. They are always having the opening. Hydrothode pore is have, and that is always kept open, and thereby it is an uncontrolled process. And transpiration has a cooling effect because water is evaporated. That's why it's having a cooling effect. But never the guttation has a cooling effect. So these are the differences between guttation and the transpiration, and which you have to remember all the mechanism behind this transpiration and also these factors affecting the transpiration, and then the aspects of this antitranspirants as well as guttation.